All right, good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. Today is Wednesday, September 13th. This is the Town Council Finance Committee. It's our 5 o'clock regularly scheduled meeting. I'll call this meeting to order and notice that we have a full slate of committee members present. First item is on the agenda is to approve the minutes from August 15th, 2023. Cody sent those out earlier this week. Has everybody had a chance to review? Any concerns? Can I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Thank you. That passes 3-0. Next up is, I think what's going to take up the bulk of our meeting is we have some guests from Public Works with us today to talk about our equipment and vehicle replacement programs. So I'm going to turn it over to Tom and his team to help educate us about how we go about understanding when vehicles need to be replaced and how that flows into the budget and whatnot. So
Great.
thank you guys for coming.
I'll flip it right over to Liam. He's taken on this.
I'd like to thank the committee for entertaining this. I think one observation I've made over the last few budget years and probably beyond that has been a real desire from the finance committee to understand some of these routine budgetary drivers. And certainly our fleet and our capital improvement plan is a large one that we heard a lot about. And so this is the first of what I expect will be at least a few kind of out of budget cycle presentations to do some level of education for the committee as to why we do what we do. And I think it becomes far more manageable to do that when there isn't maybe dollars directly associated with that time. So this is sort of the education off cycle that I hope the committee will continue to entertain. The presentation you'll see and the discussion we'll have this evening about our fleet maintenance program, it really, I can't say enough about our fleet maintenance division. I mean, the work that they do, you'll see some of this in the presentation. This division exemplifies so much of what we try to do in municipal government, from having an effective feeder program in partnership with local colleges, to having regionalized efforts and services across municipalities, to looking for creative ways to generate revenue. They really, and not every division or department could do that, but this one has seen an opportunity historically and has done it exceedingly well. They have a workforce that's committed. We have very little turnover. The rates that we pay these staff, they could go out in the private sector and probably double their money. But it's a reality that they know, and I think they really appreciate. I think it's a testament to the morale and the culture that they've really cultivated down there. And the two people tasked with shepherding that at this point are at the table, and I think just have done a phenomenal job. So I'd like to just make sure that's really known. The fleet program is a 7-figure investment just about every year, between school buses and the odd fire apparatus and rescue and cruisers and plow trucks and the odd piece of specialized equipment. So it's a huge financial commitment that the town makes. And again, we just thought there would be real value in the committee understanding how we manage that now, and answer some of those questions I think pretty consistently come up. So that's kind of my introductory remarks. So it's my pleasure to introduce Ed Alden, who is our fleet maintenance manager, and Stephen Buckley, who's our deputy director of Public Works. And I think Ed's going to take us through his presentation.
Okay. Hi, I'm Ed. I'm the fleet manager. Way outside of my comfort zone here. I don't like doing this, so.
We're happy to have you.
Okay. So our staff, there's 10 of us down there. As the slide says, there's myself, I have an assistant, parts manager, fabricator, and 6 techs. We have an amazing team. These guys are just awesome. There's nothing they can't fix, especially as a team. They like working together. There's not disagreements, but the best part is like our internship with the community college. I have 3 of my full-time techs. We had them as interns, so they worked with us for maybe a year or more, and then we offered them a full-time position. And without that, we would not be fully staffed. We could not do what we've done, which, like I said, this helps the college out because we grade them and do that stuff. Plus, like I said, we couldn't get what we have, and we can mold them to be the kind of techs we want. They can learn from our field, and most of them don't get a taste of the outside world to know what they can really make, which helps us out.
Have you had any high schoolers like intern or participate in that program?
The last one would have been me. in 1996. Since then, no. So presently for the town of Scarborough, we have 177 vehicles, 22 generators, and all kinds of other equipment we maintain. This breaks down in further detail for each department. I don't probably need to read this to you guys, but there's a lot of stuff. That 177 consists of all rolling vehicles. So that's everything from registered things to tractors, things like that. That does not include the lawnmowers, chainsaws, weed whackers, paint machines, snow blow, all the other stuff. That is just for four-wheeled things that are self-powered. As you can see, we have 22 generators because every public safety, all the fire departments have their own, a bunch of schools have their own, which are also the shelters. We maintain all of those, and we have a bunch of smaller generators that handle the traffic lights, that little small ones that we take care of as well. We have one technician that handles the fire department vehicles, which we call out there, each one of those. That same technician also handles the rescues. We handle the police department, which is handled by one of our interns. She came from the college, worked her way up, and she take care of police cars, which we do everything from getting the car in raw to setting it up, putting the cages in it, which is not really any other towns around do that. They all sub that out to somebody.
One of our former interns.
One of our former interns.
Yeah.
Yeah, full-time.
Full-time. It has been for 10 years or so.
Which I'm also proud of. We are probably, the female technicians in this world are very rare, and females in public works as a technician, again, probably the only one in New England. And this girl is just a woman. She's amazing. She does great work.
I had a question. You said that most towns typically sub out the work that you do on that. Is that something that people hire you guys to do for their equipment, or do you only do that?
No, we do Scarborough's. Old Orchard has hired us to do theirs.
Is that something you want to expand?
Not without a lot more people.
Okay.
So then we have the Prouts Net Cruiser, the Harbor Master. We do handle the DEA. They get vehicles that all of a sudden we'll see something new come in that's an undercover vehicle. We take care of those. Community Service Department, they are one that keeps us very busy. They have a lot of lawnmowers. They have a lot of equipment that is running a lot of hours in the summertime. That keeps one technician almost busy all summer long, just keeping that stuff up and going. More planning department, IT. School department is another department where one of our former interns has taken on the role of maintaining that department all by himself, which is our buses, 30 buses to keep them on the road, which not all of them are going every day, and the 8 minivans. I don't know if I could ever find a person to replace Zach. He's just been awesome, but school department keeps us busy. Plus we have the school maintenance division. Next one. So like this says, after many years, we had a reputation because the fire department, most firefighters work for different towns all around, and Scarborough was known that our equipment always worked. The stuff wasn't in the shop. It was well taken care of. So over and over, people, other chiefs around had asked us, "Hey, would you guys think about taking on some more work?" And my predecessor, he put a lot together, studied it, and figured out a way that we could actually hire another tech to take on most of that stuff, but also help out being on call in the winter time. So it saves everybody else from being on call for a week. It adds another person to help out. And we started off with Old Orchard Beach, Fire and Police, Hollis, Wells, and Kennebunk. In 2022, we added Westbrook, which has been our busy customer lately. But every one of them, it started off being hopefully a position for 75% of the time and 25% on public works, but it's become closer to 100% of the time taking care of them, but we're making it work.
So I had a question on this in terms of your pricing for services.
Yes.
As a service provider for these type of maintenance, in this maintenance work, how do you price it? Do you price it cost plus, or is it just a break even kind of thing?
There's a little bit of
So we make a profit on it?
It's around
Right here.
25% roughly. So yeah, we mark up
Above
our labor.
cost.
Yes.
Yeah, we built in that margin
Right.
for parts and labor.
parts and labor. All parts over $1,000, we mark up 10%. Everything else is marked up 15%. For all, and then the rest we figured in the labor to figure in the time we got to do research or anything else. So there's,
One of the distinction factors and why I think we were approached is particularly on the fire side, I won't say anyone can fix the diesel engine, but it's really the pump maintenance. And this is highly specialized. It's not uncommon for a department to send a truck out. It's a day drive from here. So it takes it out of service and so it's a big hassle. So having the trained technicians in our house and be able to do that kind of work is a huge premium, time and cost.
So do you feel that the services that we take on for other towns, doesn't impede us in any way in terms of doing our own maintenance?
Scarborough always comes first.
Yeah.
We always, there's sometimes a balancing act there,
Is that-
but no, Scarborough stuff takes priority. But that's why I try to have one person that's dedicated to the other stuff. And like I've had Buxton, Standish, and Arundel have all reached out to me in the last year and a half, asking me to take on their stuff. And right now, it's just not possible.
So like you just took on Westbrook and it sounds like they're producing a heavy load. Is that because they maybe haven't been managed to the same degree in the past?
Yes, because we're hoping that with them, once we cut them caught up to the grade we like, it would slow down some, but their stuff, I think their stuff runs as much as Scarborough's over there, and they have a lot of stuff that's tired. It was old. They're finally getting some newer equipment, which is helping. But
Before we've taken any of these communities on, Ed and his team have done a full evaluation of the fleet, so we know what we're getting involved with. And we make it clear that they're subscribing to our maintenance schedule, which is often different.
it's a lot
Every
different than
time
what they
different.
had. And
So we're quite selective. And to your point, there's a point, I think we're probably at it where we're at our threshold and it doesn't probably make sense from additional staff and even just facilities. We only have so many garage bays that we can utilize. So I don't think we have much capacity if any at this point.
Okay. Yeah, because presently we maintain 75 vehicles for the out of towns, which all those vehicles, well, there's a few like a jet ski and a few small things, but everything else, those are all registered piece of rolling equipment that we're maintaining. It keeps us very busy.
One other thing I'd just say is that those contracted services are for police and fire predominantly vehicles. So
And rescue.
and rescue. So to the extent we can schedule those in for service. Whereas with Public Works, Ed and his crew needs to be available because things break, in plowing situations. So I guess that's one of the other ways we can manage it. We can kind of schedule this maintenance as opposed to needing to deal with an immediate crisis. It happens, but rarely.
It has been harder, but most of these, like the departments right now, if I call out to Allegion's truck, they ask for a repair, they're booking 2 months away. So when these fire departments call me and I say, well, listen, we can look at it on Monday, they're happy as heck, because they only have to park it for 3 days. Or if it's something quick, bring it down here, we'll squeeze it in. So we try to, we understand it's emergency equipment. We got to help them too. So
Do you feel like your fees reflect the fact that you guys were able to respond quickly as opposed to out-of-state people? I feel like there's more value in the fact that you're right here and you have a quicker turnaround and readily available. I guess in my simple mind, I'm always wondering if you can charge more certain places and try to make more money for the town.
We're definitely cheaper than anywhere else. I suppose that's something we could look at. We're definitely charging more than it's costing us. But I think it's definitely a cost savings for the other towns.
I don't think it's unreasonable to compare what it would cost to have a private entity prepared. If they're not doing it through us, are they going to a private entity and what are they charging? So why can't we charge what they're charging? And that's just, you don't have to answer that.
I think, I think there's obviously an argument to be made there. I think that we also recognize that, these are also, these are municipal clients. And so there's a balancing act there, right? Where we want to make sure we obviously have our costs covered. But these are our kind of neighbors to the south often. And I think the idea of increasing those fees to such a degree that it becomes cost prohibitive for them or more challenging from a budget standpoint. I think that, again, that's kind of correct me if I'm wrong, I'm guessing that's kind of the methodology. It's a partnership.
it's a partnership. And the other difference is sometimes being a public works, we don't bill flat rate. So like if you go to a private garage, they're going to charge you, okay, if it takes them 15 minutes, they're still going to charge you an hour. We're going to charge you by the hour, even if we're trying to figure it out on our own. So some repairs might take longer, but they get charged for the whole time, whereas in the flat rate world, they could be figuring out that you're only gonna get billed for 2 hours, even if they spend 6 on it. So that's where there's a give and take.
I had a question, you don't need to go back on the slides, but when you were doing the inventory, the review of the inventory of vehicles, what, didn't we have a vehicle for the animal control person? Was that on the list or didn't? Maybe I missed it.
It was under fleet just general fleet vehicles.
That's under the regular police department.
Okay,
That's yes, I did marine patrol separate, but
I see.
the animal control officers, I listed that
Utility
under
vehicles.
the utility in the
okay.
PD.
And then this may be jumping ahead, so if it is, please tell me and I'll hold the question, but we're going to talk about replacement schedule at some point on this. So are you coming to that?
Yeah, getting to the replacements.
I'll hold my question, thanks.
Do you think your facilities are above par for being able, like I drive by Old Orchard's Public Works Department quite frequently, and I had the opportunity to tour yours a couple of years ago, and there's really no comparison. You got a parts department, everything's really well organized, different equipment. Does this, like doing things for other communities, help you to kind of, or that scale, help you to be better prepared to handle our own and theirs?
I'd say it does. I mean, we're really proud of the building we have. I mean, there's a lot of towns around us. 3 of them neighboring communities all have brand new public works facilities. And we're in one that was built in 86. We moved in 96. So we've been there almost 30 years. And it's still, I guess it's up to the people that help set it up that it's still that nice that other towns still look to us to set up their place. Our buildings is set up, it allows us to handle these things. It's big enough. Yeah, I've gone to some of the other communities and I wouldn't trade the garage I'm in for theirs. Or like Saco's brand new one. They just moved into Westbrook. No, I'll stick with what we have.
They're fine. Westbrook just built a new building and we're taking care of their equipment.
Their fire, because their fire truck went somewhere else, but yeah, there's long stories behind some of these
Okay.
things.
Fair.
Okay, so vehicle replacement schedule. So we have a replacement schedule. We follow the APWA, American Public Works Association, their guidelines, but most everything we have, we're able to keep 2 to 3 years longer because of the way we take care of it and how we treat it, which 2 to 3 is for some. Our annual schedule for Public Works, every year we replace 1 full-size plow truck, 1 pickup truck, and then 1 specialized piece of large equipment, whether it's a front-end loader, a backhoe, an excavator, certain things like that. This allows us to keep our plow trucks for 16 years, which those are the one that we do keep for at least 6 years, 6 to 8 years longer than those should be, than the APWA recommends them being on the road. But we keep them going. The pickup trucks, we can keep them on the road for about 10 years. And this is where we also find that we get a good return on them when we sell them outright. So there's still something left of them. And we're not putting a lot of work, a lot of dollars into them at that point. Equipment, smaller equipment, like, let's see, we have compactors, things like that. We replace those on an as needed basis. So once they start costing a lot, once we've had to put an engine in them, everything else, then we'll realize that at that point we need to get those.
But that's the real key, is to turn these out before they start costing us serious money and they still have some residual value, trade in or otherwise.
It's huge key. The fire department, right now, the fire department's engine and pumpers and ladders are 20-year replacement. And the utility vehicles are about 10 years, with the exception of like the lieutenant's vehicle, which never stops, which we try to cycle that every 5 years. Once again, it's our maintenance that's allowing us to keep them for 20 years, but we now have a few trucks that are getting really close to 20 years. We got to start looking at soon. Rescue department and ambulance approximately every 6, and the utility vehicles 10, follows everybody else. Police department, frontline cruisers get replaced approximately every 2 to 3 years. With the utility vehicles, the detective's car, the plow trucks are about 5 to 10 based on what they're used for. Prouts Neck and Marine Resources are 2 vehicles that we do pass around. Prouts Neck usually gets a cruiser that's been in service for 1 year to 2 years, and they'll buy it from the police department and run it. And they can usually get a little longer out of it because it's driven by only 1 or 2 people. It's driven around Prouts Neck. It's not used as a regular cruiser. It's still a cruiser, but it's different. And the marine resource truck, we've traditionally cycled that. It's gone in to become the yard plow truck. It gets passed around.
So I've got a question for you. In some towns that I drive by, I noticed that there are school buses parked in people's houses. So do we allow folks to do that, take the vehicles home?
Not school buses.
Okay.
Other vehicles do go home with people.
Okay.
Yes.
And then is the idea that those are for personal use, or is that in case they are on call and need to?
On calls, they're the people that are on call 24,
Okay,
that could be called in at any time.
great.
One of the differences, like the Marine Patrol, this year we're downsizing it. They've always had a big 3/4 ton truck. This year they're getting just a 1/2 ton truck, will still tow the boats and do everything else, and plus it'll cost a lot less to drive around town in. Maintenance will be cheaper, so that's one place I'm trying to do some efficiency things. Community services, they have a good sized fleet. They're heavy trucks, which are 3/4 and 1 tons. Most of those trucks are all 10 to 12 years. We try to turn those out. The utility vehicles, we replace those as needed. All their utility vehicles have been hand-me-down police cars. So most of them they've been used and abused, but we can, in this field, they can get by another 5, 7 years. We can baby them along because they're treated a lot different. And mowers, they're replaced ideally 11 to 13 years. And that's again on how long they last, how they're treated. Like just the other day, again, we had one that got filled with a diesel engine got filled with gasoline, and they run it till it won't run anymore. We're able to save it and get it going, but there's only so many times these things can happen before it gets very expensive. Planning code and IT as needed. Those vehicles they're treated differently, so we just run them as long as we can and just still turn them out so we can get an okay value traded. School department. Right now, presently, we do 3 school buses a year, every year. That allows us to keep buses for approximately 10 years, maybe a little bit over, depending on the replacement, how long we can get them. Minivans, which we have 8 of, we try to turn those out every 10 years. Those are being turned out usually because they're rusted so bad. The minivans travel on the highway, they'll have 300,000 miles when they're done. They just get used a lot. And then we have one full-size van that's used for transporting lunches and foods and stuff that we're trying to turn that out every 15 years. Which we're coming up on.
So are all vehicles purchased using capital, or are there some that we are actually buying outright with cash? I know we ask this question every year and we never make a dent, so to speak.
I'll look at somebody else now.
Both. I mean, some vehicles are bonded, and some are appropriated. And it depends on obviously the larger pieces of equipment, the plow trucks, for instance. Obviously, we had this discussion through the budget with school buses. Certainly they meet the definition of a capital investment in terms of their magnitude of cost and their duration. But we are actively looking at appropriating a lot of these annual reinvestments.
Yeah, I really think it's about time we started. I want to see some progress in this area.
So we
This
did.
budget cycle. I know
We
we
did.
did.
Yep.
So I'd like to, yeah,
And patrol cruisers, I believe, have been appropriated for a number of years. So we actually are making some good strides in that
that's
direction.
great.
Those are the 3 things that we purchase every year. So those are obvious ones that it makes sense to move into the operational budget.
Terrific.
One thing just to mention, I've come to appreciate during my municipal career, it ends up being really important if a vehicle is kind of a pooled vehicle where there's multiple drivers as opposed to a single driver. No, like a cruiser. I mean, people are hopping in that and driving it in all sorts of different ways. And it's remarkable how vehicles really take a beating with just different driving habits. It's not that they abuse it, it's just different drivers. The best example in the other direction would be our plow trucks. Those are a driver's assigned a truck, and they take ownership and responsibility of cleaning it and maintaining it, and we tend to see better longevity.
We're not treating them like rentals. That's great.
Right. Now, the exception would be, we've got a spare plow driver because we don't have all plow runs covered. And those vehicles end up taking beating just because probably not the same level of experience of the driver, but
And we do have a spare plow truck that every driver just hops into, which doesn't get the same care as the rest of them, because you're not in it every time. They don't look at it the same, but yeah.
I know you're focusing mainly on equipment, and I don't want to get too far off track here, but how are you doing in terms of staffing?
I'm fully staffed
Great.
on my vehicle maintenance side.
Great.
Which I'm, knock on wood, I'm happy. Yeah, we're fully staffed.
And not intending to ask for additional staff, at least
No.
in the near term.
No.
We could use 3 more or more on the operation side.
Yes. Okay, so
That's not today.
No,
So vehicle equipment replacement process. So step one, virtually determine the need based on usage, changing needs, availability, budget examples. These are some examples of some ways we've changed some things of how we bought things in the past. One of the things we've done, the last 2 fire trucks we bought have both had we've shortened them up tremendously, so they fit better in all the new neighborhoods that are a lot tighter now. We've simplified the trucks to make it just to make them easier, more friendly for the operators and safer to use. We simplified on one of our street sweepers. We were able to buy a smaller street sweeper that can still do everything a big one can do, but you don't need a CDL to drive it. And the easier maintenance, a much simplified machine to keep. And street sweepers are something that every day they go out, they usually need to be worked on at least once. So simpler the better. We've gone to 1-ton plow trucks, so like Ford F550, Ford Super Duty plow trucks that you do not need a CDL to drive. Those fit better down some of the roads. The disadvantage is they do not hold nearly enough material. So the amount of salt and sand, they have to make many more trips back to Public Works to fill up when they hold half as much sand. So there's the disadvantage, and they're all running at max GVW, so they will not last as long as a full-size truck. Another one, we've gone to we've switched ambulance to a truck chassis from the van chassis. The chassis should handle better. It'll last longer, a little more rugged. Just trying to, the rear body's bigger. It's a different way the Scarborough has not gone in a long time.
What was the acronym you referred to? GVW?
gross vehicle weight.
GVW, gross vehicle weight, yep. We've also gone to a smaller excavator. For years, we have an excavator currently that's 23 years old that we're just replacing this year that we got a new one. We went to a much smaller one. So when we're working on the side of the road, it does not take up the whole lane. You can block just one lane. You don't have to stop traffic. It'll make the job much more efficient. It's easy to get around. It's a simplified machine, but
The reality is, we're not in the construction business, we're in the maintenance business, so on the off chance, project demands a bigger machine, it's far more cost effective to rent it for the day or two.
Yeah.
For the project, than to have it sitting in the yard waiting to be used.
And we've also gone to all hybrid police cruisers. These have been saving on maintenance, and they have been much better on fuel, probably getting 3 to 5 miles a gallon better than which on the amount of miles a police car does, that's tremendous. And maintenance, the brakes, everything we've had extremely good luck with them. And so all cruisers that we are buying now are all hybrid. We're a little hesitant at first until we saw them out there and we tried one. And after that, we've realized that they do work. So it's one of the things we're changing.
I just want to stay with this slide. I mean, because each one of these examples, in conversations with Ed, they did have to think outside the box. I mean, it's very easy just to replace like for like and never consider anything else. And, the shorter engine or the shorter wheelbase on the fire engines, yes, was to adapt to how our neighborhoods are changing. The sweeper was a huge measure less expensive than a like for like replacement. I mean, half the cost, something in that order of magnitude. And and all of these are really informed decisions where they go out, they talk to our neighbors who maybe have trialed this equipment or go to the manufacturer. And again, I think that's really impressive and unique that every time a piece of equipment comes up, they're asking these questions about whether we need to replace that 23-year-old excavator with the same thing, or can we get by with something cheaper that's more efficient, that's less costly. And so these are just a short list in my last few years that came to mind, where we are trying to do the work better and more intelligently. And I think this is, again, really commendable from this group.
Now swapping to the 1-ton plow truck. Talk to me, how do you refill the sand on a plow truck?
We have a giant sand storage shed. We have a loader, just drives up the scoops and
So
dumps
does
it.
the driver get in the loader and load up the
No,
truck? Or
we
you
have-
have somebody
No,
there?
there's a person that's in the loader at all times, because with those 16 trucks, there's somebody coming in continuously, and the loader is also the one that keeps the yard, Public Works cleared, the fuel island cleared, so people can get back. He's plowing that at the same time. So
And the same loader can load a dump truck versus a 1 ton.
yes, it's just, yeah, bucket's a little big, but it'll do it all.
The 1 tons, I think are all equipped with the front conventional plow gear.
Blade and
V12,
wing, yeah.
But they also have a wing, so they're able to actually move some snow over, some on
Wing on the side or
the
the,
side.
We have blade, and just, so they're virtually just like our full-size plow trucks, but on a smaller chassis. They can still do they can do a lot of work.
And again, in addition to the smaller neighborhoods, this was also an opportunity to utilize staff who did not have a CDL. So, because again, that's a whole nother skill set that's very difficult to find. And while they may not last as long, they are certainly cheaper to replace. And so it's not ideal for every route, but there certainly are some routes, especially ones closer to the garage, where those more frequent trips to fill up with material actually make some sense.
In fact, one of our permanent drivers, she works just seasonally, is a retired police sergeant. And she's in that vehicle because it doesn't require a CDL.
So vehicle equipment replacement process. So step two, we do a bid. I write out, there's a template I use and it's got all the boilerplate stuff. And that's below that is where I'll start entering in the specs for whatever truck it is, because I've already done research ahead of time to figure out, before it ever comes to finance, what we're doing, I've done research. I've reached out to everybody to find out the dollar amounts, what we need to be asking for. So after this is all done, I'll put all the information for the specs. So engines, axles, tires, whatever we need, I'll put it in there. I'll work with the finance here and we'll send this out with a date for a bid opening date. I'll reach out to vendors. We'll contact and identify the vendors. We also post it to our website. So anybody can bid on the stuff. Sometimes we'll get a bid from someplace in Massachusetts. Sometimes somebody further away bids, but traditionally it's usually our local vendors that bid on the stuff. Bids all have to be in by a certain date and time. And at that point, we'll sit in Tom's conference room and each one of them gets opened up at that point, looked at, the vendors identified what they bid and their price. Bids, then from that point on, the finance takes it, they have a copy of it, they save. I take all the original bids down with me at Public Works, and that's where I start reviewing, which is I'll read through spec by spec to make sure they've met every single one of them, read the exceptions. And that's when we start deciding, okay, which ones here do we want to try out? If we have a lot of vendors, like, okay, so right now we're in the process of a catch basin truck. I got 3 bids on it. 2 are in budget. 1 is much higher than it's out of our budget realm. The 2 that are in budget, we've gone and looked at them. We've gone to different communities that have gone up to Lewiston, Auburn, and looked at a brand new one there, demo. Then I went down to Saco to the one they have. And later on this month, I have another one of the machines, the same machine I looked at in Auburn is coming down for us to try out in person. And so I'll look at that. We'll let operators try it, do a full evaluation on it. And at that point, after this is all the research, I'll make a recommendation to the department head, town manager, and the assistant town manager for which vehicle to purchase.
so you get budget approval first and then go out to bid, or is it the other one? Okay.
Yeah.
But very often Ed's on the ball. I mean, over the course of the winter and the spring, he's developing the specifications. It's not uncommon July 1st or whenever budget approval is in hand that we're actively soliciting bids, particularly now with build times being pushed out so far. The sooner we can get an award out there and kind of get in the production order, the better, frankly.
So following along with that, traditionally for years, we go out to bid on the 1st of July, August for a plow truck. We'd be able to get that. This is for a full-size commercial dump truck. We could get that truck by fall. It would be built and we could have that truck on the road by January. That's starting in July to January. Now, if I order one in July or August, I'm lucky to get that truck by the next August or further. We're looking at 12 to 18-month wait times. That's just for the chassis. And then our upfitter, because once we buy a chassis, the truck has to go to an upfitter that installs the dump body, the plow, the wing, all the pumps. That person will not order their stuff in until they see the truck on the lot, because they don't want to sit with that much money sitting there, another $80,000 worth of parts. So that adds so we're looking at almost 2 years out on a truck that once we replace them, which it is what it is, just how much things have changed.
So when you refer to engineering costs, you mean like customization or certain specs that we require? Is that it or what?
Oh, no, this is actually specifically more engineering cost. This is on fire and rescue stuff. Fire apparatus is the engineering cost, because they'll get pre-built ahead of time, and the engineering, because every single thing Rich knows about this, every compartment, it has to go through the engineering firm to make sure it can be built onto a custom chassis.
Yeah, Don, the difference is fire apparatus are almost all custom builds. They don't roll off an assembly line. So
Did you deal with components or whatever different units? That kind of
Yes, and that's, so on those, we bought 2 fire trucks and one was a twin. The second one, we did not have to pay the engineering costs. So we ended up, even though the truck's maybe a year and a half newer, the average annual increase was not nearly as bad, because, well, we paid just what a truck would go up, the 5% to 10%, but none of the engineering costs or anything else. So we actually saved a lot of money on those vehicles, which has been one way like that. The rescues, we're able to buy another rescue that's just like the one we just got, which saves us the engineering costs, which would normally be in there every time.
And if the committee will recall, we've come to the council on 3 very quick occasions to request a waiving of our bidding process. It was to purchase, I believe at the end of the day, we got 3 cruisers. Because again, they're on the lot. We had a relationship. We could go and buy it at the specified cost. This essentially twin model of a fire engine. We had another one in the next year. They offered us the opportunity, if we placed the cost, to save a tremendous amount of money. I think that one saved something in the neighborhood of, it was either the fire engine alone or the combination of all 3 of these things saved roughly $300,000 to the town by waiving the bid process in these instances and simply purchasing a twin or model replacement. So I know at the time, by the time we came back for the 3rd time, I think there were some comments on the council about, do we have the appropriate purchasing policy? And I would say we do, because we really should be following a very public, open process for the procurement of these major capital investments, unless the council reviews it and approves it. And I think that's a good process. But those are the 3 things that come to mind when we talk about when we've waived or requested to waive with council authorization a bid process.
But even in those cases, you're still following delegation of authority and, because we do have a purchasing process, right? That requires competitive.
Part of the process is that the council can authorize it.
can waive the competitive process.
But to Councillor Hamel, put your perhaps some of your concerns at ease. All of them originally followed a competitive bid process.
Yeah.
This was simply a request to purchase an identical vehicle that already went through that process at a similar
Yeah.
cost, and that still requires council.
And you were
approval.
able to, as I recall, to quantify the savings
Yeah.
from.
Yep.
buying
Notable.
that way. So, yeah, hey, everyone's looking for a deal, right? So.
Not only cost savings, but also bringing that piece of equipment into service far sooner, given all the delays.
Yeah, and I think that run had as much to do with the uncertainty with the pandemic and supply chain and just the huge uncertainty. So when we could lock things in, it gave us a great deal of comfort.
As long as we're not buying it from a guy named Crazy Eddie.
No, he's right here.
Yeah,
It's not crazy at all, but we got our
Guys
own
from
head,
Long
yeah.
Island.
Have you seen things start to pivot back to normalcy, or it's the same?
it's getting, it's
They're
not getting any
getting
better at
longer.
all. I
Worse.
think
Not sure.
the delays are getting longer right now. So the next one, if we go through the current bid process, there are times when we'll get maybe 1, maybe 2 bids, but none of them meet our criteria, or just the time frame they have is, we can't wait that long. We need something faster. And at that point, the good part is I'll have a bid, so I'll know, let's say it's a police car, I'll have a price that each police car is going to be $46,000 that meets our spec. Well, at that point, but it's going to take a year and a half to get it. I'll start shopping around to see what I can find that's still at the $46,000. And that's one of the ways we have had to do these things before, to get police cars faster, to get any of the equipment that we need to upgrade and update. And another one where we go outside the budget is crash replacement. That's always the fun one, when a police car gets totaled and we need a new police car tomorrow. And it's not just police cars, but police cars are the major one. There's other ones that total at times.
Now, do we have insurance for that when it's?
We do have insurance for that, but insurance, it still doesn't help us get one any faster. Yeah, so no, we'll get the coverage. I get a certain amount, but the insurance, that's a whole nother conversation, doesn't cover everything on a police car. So, but the other way that we can go outside the bid process, well, we don't like to go, but it's Sourcewell and there's HGAC, which are, these are companies we subscribe to that, they've already done the bidding from different companies for certain types of equipment. And you can go onto their website and say, okay, we're looking for a plow truck. This company, Sourcewell's already done the bidding. They've gone out, done a competitive bid process, and you can buy under that bid. Some of the places we've used that, I believe we use that on our forklift. And I know our floor scrubber, the one that picks up all the oil in the shop on the floor, we bought that through those competitive bid processes rather than going out to bid, because really usually a lot of those, there's only one vendor that might sell them. So you're not going to be able to get a competitive, you go to the Sourcewell to get the best price.
And our policy, purchasing policy allows us to piggyback on state and federal government procurement policies or processes, I should say.
Vehicle disposal reassignment. This is when vehicles are done or equipment's done, sometimes it's traded in, sometimes it's reassigned to a different department, which is usually like the police cruisers that we can pass around. We do a lot of auctioning. There's a website called Gov Deals where I post stuff, or Keenan Auction. We send a lot of equipment there. And there's been one time recently we did a consignment sale because we figured we'd do better selling a fire truck directly on a place that just sells fire trucks. We sold as our old ladder one, because I knew that certain things don't sell well at an auction, but if you put it out there to people, market it to the right people.
Just as an aside, and that's the one I think Brockton, Massachusetts bought.
Brockton, Massachusetts bought
And
it.
they're it's still in service. They had, Chief, I don't know, they had a new ladder truck replacement on order, but it was a 2 or 3 year delivery date, and they needed a spare vehicle in that interim period. So
They completely modified it, changed it around. It had a pump in it. They pulled all those things out. But so because all they wanted was just a ladder. And the ladder was the one thing that was pretty good on the truck. The rest of it was pretty tired, actually very tired. The current trends and future changes, delivery times are getting worse and worse. Things are not getting any better for the turnaround for police cars. Fire trucks are 2 years out. Plow trucks are 12 plus months out. The supply chain challenges, we down at the shop, we struggle with getting parts. A lot of times we might have a truck that's sitting for, a month waiting for a part to come in that we're trying to get, or longer. So we have been actually trying to, certain parts that we've had to wait 6 months for, we'll buy an extra one, even if it's going to cost us $3,000 to have it sitting on the shelf. We can't wait the next time for these parts to come in. The other changes, like we have in the smaller equipment for the tighter roadways, the non-CDL, trying to find more energy efficient vehicles, green vehicles, whether it's fully electric, hybrid. There's also safety rules have changed. The trucks that are so high to climb into, the equipment that's hard to hurt people's back to work on, with trying to minimize all those as well. We also want to keep it a good place to work, because if we have plow trucks that nobody wants to drive, they're falling apart, we're gonna have even harder time finding people that want to even keep things going, which I know it's always been a selling for the fire department, that we have fairly new fire trucks, new rescues. It makes it a desirable place to go. So one of the other huge trends I've noticed is like the dealers we go to around for service or warranty service that we've even been sold on, they're down to 2 technicians to maintain. If that, I know it might not seem like a lot, but they'll be maintaining every vehicle that's coming in. So if you pictured Prime Ford down there and every vehicle going through, and they only have 2 people to work on every one of them. So that's why I've had one of our trucks for warranty repair has been sitting at the dealership for 2.5 months. I am now trying to get permission to do warranty repairs. If they'll just give me the parts, I'll eat the labor. We need the truck back because it doesn't work. So this is what we can't, there's no place to send our stuff to get fixed. So that's what, especially in the middle of the night, there's no place, but even when middle of summer, we can't get the stuff fixed.
So the last bullet there, the modification of capital planning, again, these delays in delivery, I think we're going to have, I think the finance committee and the council and staff are going to have discussions about accelerating the authorization of some of these capital investments Because we know that, we may have a piece of fire apparatus on the CIP plan for FY 26. But if it waits till FY 26, we're not going to get it till FY 28. And so if the need is in FY 26, we might have to accelerate some of these authorizations, knowing full well we're not actually going to pay for it till 26. But we need to start that process sooner, because we're not in a place anymore where we can go out in August, place an order and get it in that same fiscal year. And so again, certainly there's no proposals in front of the committee this evening, but I do think that, this is about kind of educating and planting seeds for what we're seeing and how we're going to adapt our process moving forward.
You already put together a 5-year plan. It may just be getting a little more, putting a little more effort into the second and third year. And then maybe there is some kind of approval that can happen that allow you to order. Takes 2 years, 3 years to get it. You need to be ahead of it.
Yeah, you'll notice in the 5-year CIP, look back through, any of the budgets, the equipment and vehicle replacement is very well built up. For those 5 years are really plug and play. There might be a little flexibility that happens, but by and large, if it's programmed for next year, you're going to see it next year.
Yeah, I'm impressed by, how thorough you are in terms of planning and managing, this whole area. So, I think it's impressive and, gives me confidence that we're doing everything possible to manage, the value and cost side of this area, which is just, increasing tremendously. So, and it seems that your work to provide services for other towns also as a way of kind of helping us, mitigate expense for ourselves. So impressive. Thank you.
Any questions?
I don't know if I have any questions. I think it's really apparent that you guys have created a well-efficient system here with servicing the equipment. And I'm going to circle back around to, I think maybe we should be getting paid and compensated for it. When you sit there and you say to me, well, we are a municipality and we do assist other towns. My thought is, well, how is Old Orchard assisting us in that manner when we are using taxpayer money to run our public works department? And I wonder if we can maybe generate a little more income, because not only are you fixing them, but you guys are like implementing this whole replacement plan that is very serious and very good and very efficient, I think. And I think there's value behind that as well.
Yeah, there's an opportunity next. These contracts aren't forever, so they come up for renegotiation
Annually.
That's something we'll look at. The other thing is, and why we're interested in the first place, is that by hiring this extra technician, we'll say, to handle this extra work, when they're not working on those vehicles, they're available to us as well. So it's a way for us to augment our own staff. It's not all the time or exactly when we need them, but there are occasions, I'm sure, they are there and working on our work.
Yes, I think they're helpful during winter when we've got all the fire trucks on the road. They need to be kept on the road. So having more techs available, that really helps there.
One of the other things I brought up during the budget season that I will just happen to bring up, if sitting in front of me, is a lot of the feedback that we got and included is that people want the sidewalks cleared. So I think I had mentioned before, and I know you don't need a CDL license to operate one of the sidewalk clearers. So I don't know if maybe at some point you guys could think about maybe getting another one of those. We have a lot of discussions about clearing sidewalks, and I just wanted to mention that as well.
I'll second that one. I tell you, you can wreck a lot of stuff with those sidewalk machines, though. You should be a good driver. You might not need a CDL though. But no, I've noticed you have a very efficient and effective department. It's impressive. You guys have your systems well oiled, and actually, I hardly ever see a piece of equipment that doesn't look like it's up to Scarborough standards, whether it's in the police or fire or public works. They're all very appealing to look at. So they're well taken care of. So thank you guys for sharing a little bit of your world with us and helping us understand it a little better.
Thank you for the comment on the equipment, the rolling stock that's on the street. We recognize that's in many respects not the only, but the most visible interaction our residents have, right? How our cruisers look and how the plow trucks. We make a concerted effort by having wash bays available, not only in the public safety building, but the public works. And we give them time during their work shift to make sure the vehicle's cleaned. So I think appearance matters, and it's not just superficial. It's just not cosmetic. Any equipment operating in the environment in Maine The more often you wash it, the longer it lasts from a rust point of view and all those sorts of things.
Just a second off that, one of the issues I know that's been questioned is because some of our stuff looks awful nice when it's going away. Some of it looks really nice on the outside, but underneath, we've got numerous trucks where the body's still shiny, the cabs looks great, but the frame's broken in half. So it's
Yep.
just because they look great doesn't mean underneath they're very nice.
The other thing we do, Mike Shaw implemented this and we will continue it, is all the vehicles, for all intents and purposes, are numbered. And that's done for not just fleet maintenance purposes, but also visibility. If someone sees a vehicle that's speeding or doing something they shouldn't, there's an easy way to identify. I believe there's a system to that.
There's a
So the
system.
number will tell you the year it was purchased,
Yeah,
right, or
the
put in service.
The first two digits of the year of the vehicle, when it was put in service, and the second two are what vehicle number, so 0012 would be a truck that's a 2000 and it's truck 12.
Okay, now you're giving me a rabbit hole to go down a little bit. What kind of technology do you put in your vehicles? Do we have GPS tracking or?
Plow trucks do have GPS tracking, which is new this year. All of our plow trucks and pickup trucks and light duty, they all have a GPS tracking.
So maybe you'll be able to use that to make the routes more efficient or,
Possibly, yes, and
We also track material that we're putting out on the road and the rate that we're putting that out.
okay,
so we can at any point after a storm or let's say somebody on the turnpike says our truck went by and through snow and broke their window. Well, we can actually look and see if a truck was at that place at that time. Were they putting material out? Was the blade down? We can see a lot of things.
well, so it tracks if the blade's down too.
Tracked if the sanders on, not the blades
don't know
down,
what
but I
you're
can't back.
And
The
the,
school buses. Did I
this-
hear that that
the
was-
school bus fleet is fully outfitted. I think this fall was the first time.
This fall, it's winning, fully in effect with their routing software. And they actually do all their pre-trip inspections on these now. So there's no more paper copies. They walk around and they take pictures of things.
On like a tablet or
A
something?
tablet, yes. And that
Mhm.
tablet also shows, I believe it shows a picture of each student getting on.
Yeah, the bus driver will actually has a, this is an iPad or some sort of interface and will check the students on the bus, so they know who's on. And then,
Yep, they scan as they get
Yep.
on.
and then ultimately, I believe there's going to be an opportunity for parents to see when the bus is coming. They'll be able to track where it is coming and going. I think they're a little cautious in rolling that piece out. They're trying to perfect this first piece first.
But just understanding who's on the bus.
It's huge.
Like, yeah, it's huge. You can plan ahead.
If I may
Chief
comment,
Kendall.
just, with the approval of the new CADs at the core system for public safety, all police and fire vehicles will have ADL or automatic vehicle locators as well, and will have GPS tracking in that when that gets implemented.
When's that?
Next.
Yeah, about a year.
About a year?
A year, yeah.
Nice. Thank you. Any other questions?
No.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thanks, Steve.
We don't get applause very often at the
Right?
finance committee meetings.
Let the minutes reflect.
Next up on the agenda, we have something that's coming down the pipe towards the council. We've discussed it in the past, but I wanted to at least give it a little airtime at the finance committee level, and that's the rezoning of some we call it Downs property, but it's VR current property that's currently zoned as VR4 into the CPD district. And trying to better understand what that might mean. I took a look back through some of the work that's been done. And I understand it's a complicated thing to try to understand and measure. And I don't know that we're quite there yet, but I was fortunate to spend some time with Karen Martin from Sedco to take a step in that direction towards, I think, getting it a little more crisper in terms of understanding at least the fiscal impacts. There's other impacts of rezoning that also, need to play into that decision. But I thought for a finance committee anyways, that this was kind of fair game and relevant for us to talk about. So Karen actually provided a memo in our packet. I want to give her an opportunity to kind of talk through that and explain it.
Sure. So back in April, we looked at a couple of things. The question to us, or to me, was, can you explain the differences between what would happen if we developed at the current zoning versus if it went into CPD? And that was really a theoretical exercise of the maximums of those zones. So once again, I always want to point out that analysis was not about what the Downs is choosing to do. It was about what those zones allowed you to do, which is very different. If you, just as a caveat, the Downs is not developing at the maximum potential density of the CPD. So anyway, that's why sometimes the numbers are pretty high. But one of the things I did make a mistake when I did this, is I double counted the shift benefit. And so I can certainly tell you how I did that. And that's what this memo is correcting, what that analysis is. So when I did the analysis, I took the total value, I took the revenues, and then I said, right, there's a benefit from doing the shift. And what I did is I threw it in as an addition instead of subtracting it, saying that we're not going to have to pay those extra dollars to the state. So it's like, I think hopefully I would have seen it if I'd done all the 3 scenarios that I did for you with this memo correction. But let's see, what's the best way to explain this? So when the shift benefit that's recorded here is correct according to each of the scenarios, but it's double counted in the original analysis. And that's because the shift is about not losing dollars as opposed to adding it back in. All right, so let's see. Let's say, let's look at this and say we had I think let's look at the scenario on page 2 of the memo. So if you don't have a TIF, basically you've got the total value, the total revenues, and we did update the revenues. So that's one of the differences between this memo. And then what you have is without a TIF, you're paying to the state, or you're losing funds to the state, but in terms of county taxes, and that's because your values went up. You are essentially losing money in the state formula for school reimbursement because of value going up, and the same with revenue sharing. So our revenue sharing, one of the factors in it is how much value do we have. So the benefit of the TIF is to say, oops, we don't have to take that extra value. So that's where you get this shift benefit, but it's not having to pay it. It's not having to lose it to the state, as opposed to what I did in the original analysis is I double counted it by adding it back in.
So the first time you did it, you overestimated, if I have this right, you
Correct.
overestimated the value of doing the zoning changes. Is that correct?
Correct.
No, the error is repeated through the whole analysis, so it equally applied to the VR4, the existing status quo, if you will. So it didn't just overvalue the different scenarios by the change, it overvalued all of them.
Okay. And I read this stuff ahead of time and I couldn't make sense of it. Okay.
Okay.
I couldn't understand what you're trying to tell me, okay, in terms of the correction. So, and I don't really know the best way to go through it, but I know you had, 4 different cases like this that you walked through, but I don't know what each one is telling us.
Okay.
In simple terms. And my bias is that I think we spend a great deal of time talking about, the upside opportunity only, and we don't really think about, not doing it. Okay, what's the benefit of not doing it, of not having additional development or not increasing the capacity of the TIF district and of the CEA. So, because all of this presumes we gotta spend money to make money, right? We gotta have growth in order to prime the pump, get the engine going.
But Don, I would suggest status quo is scenario 1. And I would argue that that is the one that we probably have the most confidence in terms of what the build out scenario would likely be and the value created would likely be. The other ones, as Karen mentioned, and they're described here, what they are 3 different development scenarios. We don't know if exactly that's what's going to happen, but these are all allowed within the new CPD zone.
Maybe it's worth taking a minute to go through it. So scenario 1, assumes that these parcels are going to be built out under VR4 zoning standards. And there's a set of assumptions that goes along with that. VR4 allows up to 4 units per acre, but you can pay an in lieu fee to get an extra 3 units an acre. So you can put 7 units an acre if you pay the fee.
And this will likely be single family.
They have to be, for the most part, residential anyways. It's all going to be residential. If
Right.
that's the case.
Absolutely.
So what Karen did was using some statistics, said, well, that's going to result in X number of school children. It's going to result in this many, police calls or fire trips, and tried to come up with how much is that population going to cost to serve. And that's where you get to the right, where it's the net benefit, which I would continue to take that with a grain of salt, but for VR4, it looks like it would be a loss leader for the town. The next scenario 2 is if it was developed under CPD standards, but residential. So similar to what the Downs has built out now, which is, I guess I'd call it mostly residential with a mix of housing types. And went through the similar exercise. How many kids is that going to result in? It's roughly the same number of kids in the schools under scenario 1 and 2, by the way. It's pretty close. But the cost, you have a bigger base under scenario 2 to spread that cost around. So that
If
one.
you get many more units, you can go 20 per acre as opposed to 7 per acre. So
Yeah, so you can go 20 single family, you can actually get up to 41 bedrooms per acre in the CPD.
And by the way, for,
Scenario 2.
Two.
Yeah,
Right.
So that's the difference in zoning.
if you just go to the first sheet, just the scenarios are described.
right, there you go. Back up,
Right
there
there.
you go. Yeah, and so on scenario 2, I said, let's use the 20 units per net residential acre. And by the way, one of the things that does sort of force us into being the developer. So we're guessing, we don't know exactly how many wetlands are out there. So I took 30% of the land out, saying that's probably wetlands, roads, other things. So there's a tremendous, as whenever you do these types of exercises, tremendous amount of assumptions. So that's what's happening here. And the mix of residential units was, I don't remember the exact ones, but we threw in some single family, some apartments, and some condos. So it's a mix of units. Again, it's on a per acre basis because I went to the maximum. It doesn't always reflect what the Downs has done because they have not done that. But again, it's the theoretical part of this exercise. Let's extend it to what the zoning allows. And so then the third one was, and the values in there, the values for that mix of units, that's the thing that did follow. We went and I pulled the different types of units that I was using, pulled that from the Downs, the assessing database. So the values reflect what's in there now per type of unit. And then the third one was, all right, well, we want to look at, what happens if it's non-residential. And so that one's harder to do because the zoning ordinance, it deals with setbacks and other things in terms of the way it's laid out. So we took an easier route, which is to say, all right, a typical non-residential acre within the Downs was generating this much value per acre. And that's what I used for this third non-residential development similar to the Innovation District. So I just took those properties and said, hey, what's the average value here? And applied it per acre. And then the last one was, okay, let's take a mix because you can do both. I said, let's take 50% of the residential that was in item 2, and let's take 50% of the non-residential that was in item 3. So those are the 4 scenarios. You could come up with 5 more scenarios if you wanted to. There's all different ways of looking at that. But I think whenever we do these exercises, what we're really trying to do is say, how do they relate to one another? You know, what happens if it's all residential? What happens if it's all commercial? These are all, it's a theoretical exercise. And so all of that stayed the same. I didn't change any of those assumptions. Where I went wrong in the original analysis was double counting the shift benefit.
So can you just define again the shift benefit, shifting from what to what?
Sure, that's because the state wants you to do economic development. That's why they created the TIF districts to begin with. Housing, I think, came along a little bit later, but the original theory was, how can we incentivize towns to invest in economic development? So the one way they could do that is to say, hey, we know that value is what you're trying to increase, but we know if you increase value, you lose out in some of the the state funding mechanisms. So when you increase your value, you lose revenue sharing and you can increase your county taxes and you can decrease your school funding formulas. So you lose
Or it
out.
affects your minimum receiver status. Is that
It's a little different, but
apply or not?
That's a little different.
John has interestingly characterized this as the growth tax. So
You remembered.
Yeah.
I do.
It is the growth
Tax
tax.
stuff. So if your income goes up, you pay more taxes.
Yeah.
That's what this is, except it's for a town.
So
Yeah.
you hear us talk sheltering. TIFs allow us to shelter this new value over here, and we're not penalized for state funding for education or revenue sharing and don't have to pay more county tax because the state doesn't recognize it if it's sheltered.
Right. And so that's the state's overture toward the municipality saying, we know that it's a good thing to invest in economic development. And we've created the TIF district and we're giving you these benefits by doing that.
And is it true that your 4 examples here are different development scenarios, different mix of housing and various things? And some are more favorable than others in terms of how the state is going to reimburse you. So of these 4, which of these 4 would be the most, or can't you compare them? Which is the most advantageous?
It's not about,
Yeah, the state's only interested in the value that's created. So it is upon us to decide what the development pattern is going to be and create the value from that.
yeah, TIF and CEA aside, probably the simplest thing to do is to look at the top kind of just straight scenarios.
Yeah.
So those are the 4 scenarios. You'll see, as Karen just explained, each of them has a different expected revenue. That's taxes that will be paid on value created. And you could look down that list and it's consistent across all the tables.
Right?
So just looking at revenue alone, it looks as though scenario 2 produces the most tax revenue.
Scenario 3.
Okay.
Revenue.
Oh,
Revenue.
I'm sorry, revenue. Yeah.
And then Karen also did a cost to serve, which is toward the right. And each of those scenarios, not surprisingly, has a different cost to serve because it's a different mix of residential and or non-residential.
Yeah.
And then the final column is a net benefit. So Councilor Hamel, to your point, this was a theoretical exercise, but intended to inform what are the financial implications of status quo or zone change.
Mhm.
And you can look over at the net benefit and you'll see the top one is the biggest loser, which is status quo.
Yep.
Scenario 2 is slightly better, but still a loser. Scenario 3, this suggests, is slightly positive.
And what is scenario 3? What are the?
That's all non-residential. I'm going to
Okay.
tell you, it's the
Innovation district, if you will, moved over there.
it's the student enrollment that drives up the cost
Right.
to serve.
Right.
The
Because
reason
we're
it
at
had-
19,000 a
Yeah, the
head
reason
now.
that has net benefit is it has by far and away the lowest cost to serve. No
Yep.
surprise.
right?
Yeah.
Okay,
So she broke this out with a TIF and without a TIF. So a TIF by itself, there's no downside other than having some restrictions on how you might use some of the captured value. There's no downside to the town, right? There's nothing wrong with the TIF. Where it gets a little controversial, and sometimes there are negative impacts, is if you have a CEA coupled with the TIF, where you're paying somebody else a portion of the money that you collect. Well, then you have to weigh, is that are those additional costs beneficial to the town? And that's also a part of, it's a different question, but it's also a question that we're going to be trying to answer soon.
So if there's no CEA, then all the benefit goes to the town, right?
Correct.
Because it's typically becomes CEA.
Right, so you can, if you know you're gonna grow in an area, you can expand your TIF district to cover that area. And if you have some projects that you can use those funds for, you can say, you can avoid paying taxes basically on those, on that growth.
yeah, it's why we took a fairly broad approach with defining the TIF district to begin with. Because remember, this TIF district is not just the Downs, it includes Oak Hill and lots of other places. But the CEA only applies to that portion that's in the CPD.
So when I first looked at this, and I'm gonna bring something, because I still think it's missing a few pieces, but like, well, they're all losing money with the exception of scenario 3, which isn't really on the table right now because we're not expanding the innovation district as part of this. So the answer is, well, stop growing, just don't do it. Now, I think it's more layered than that, but that was the initial impetus. And I think what John was looking at was, but it's still better. So you can't necessarily stop, like scenario 1 is how it's zoned today. You can't tell somebody they can't develop their land, right? So that's, and he's right in that respect. It is better. So there's different ways of looking at it, I guess. And all I wanted to accomplish with this is if everybody understands the follow the dollar a little bit better, and I want to bring up a spreadsheet that maybe will help, but understand when you do grow, this is what happens after that. And it happens over 4 or 5 years. The financial effects of that, and they can be good and bad. It's
Right. John, the only thing I want to clarify is on scenario 3, it doesn't have to be, it's non-residential. It doesn't have to be the innovation district. What is more likely to happen is there might be some retail and other things in there. I just used, because that was the example of non-residential that I had. I pulled some other areas. I looked at Bessie Square, the commercial part, so there was some similar value per acre. So it doesn't exactly have to be, I'm not saying that scenario 3 has to be light industrial or production space. It could be other things.
Before you move off this, and I know John wants to present, if you can just move to the last table, I asked Karen kind of directionally, and next one. Once we make this correction, directionally kind of rank ordering them, do things change? And keep in mind, we're doing 3 things. We're looking at development scenarios. We're looking at impact of a TIF in place and an impact of a TIF and a CEA in place. So there's 3 pieces to that. From my perspective, the big 10,000 foot takeaway, scenario 1 is consistently the loser across all. There are 4. There's some switching of position, if you will, between 1, 2, and 3, for the scenarios 2, 3, and 4. They kind of trade position. But most importantly, my big takeaway is that status quo is the worst consistently, regardless of which scenario you look at.
Doing nothing.
if nothing results in it being built out.
I see.
Right.
Fair enough.
Right, and there's so many layers to this, and that's the other thing. But for the Downs having bought it, all of most of those properties were landlocked.
That's an interesting point. It's not just do nothing. It's don't change the zoning and development occurs to the extent the current zoning allows, as opposed to it remaining vacant and undeveloped.
Because my perception on this and kind of what I hear, if I'm trying to judge how other people understand it, and by no means I have a rough working knowledge. I would have a very hard time explaining this clearly to somebody else, and that's something I've spent a lot of time on, and I'm still struggling with it. And it just seems that it's sort of all or nothing. It's like, well, we want it expand TIFs and CEAs because there's all kinds of captured value we can have? Or the other one is do nothing and just leave it going according to our current zoning, and that's bad. So is that, I mean, but that's kind of what I hear. And you hear that sort of
Yeah.
played out in various ways in public meetings and in conversations with people. You know, it's like there's not much nuance here. It's like black or white in terms of if people look at it, and I think tend to generalize it.
Yeah, well, I hope people don't think of things as bad, you know, I mean, it's not, there's no good or bad, I think, and I think there's a value question in all of this, and the financials should be, correct financials, should be a part of the equation, but it's not the only piece of the equation.
Yeah, I think that's it. So in Maine, because so much of your value is lost to other state funding formulas, there's very little incentive to growth. You're made
Right.
whole. It's mostly a value decision, I think, for what you want. Until you get pushed into minimum receivership, which we're teetering with that.
It's going back to that
When-
status, right?
When you're a minimum receiver, then there is financial incentive to a community to grow.
So we've been a minimum receiver for all but just a year or two, right? Is that?
Well, we were for probably 5 or 6 years, and now we're not.
Go back out.
I suspect we will be again in a couple of years.
Yeah. Okay.
And that, like, our net position isn't all that different, honestly, because we're just means we're not going to lose any state funding, but we'll be keeping our growth dollars then. So they offset each other for the most part.
Yeah, John, that might be the way to say it too, like if you're getting $10 million in revenue from taxes, if you're not in a TIF, you're going to give 57, just the example that we've been using, you're going to lose 57% of that $10 million. If it's in a TIF, you don't get more money, which is where I went wrong. But you do get to keep the whole 10 million.
But you're restricted in how you can use it. That's the
Right.
limitation.
Yeah, strings attached. When you're a minimum receiver, you've got no strings attached. There's also less benefit to a CEA at that time.
Right.
You stop sharing for 1 second. I may bumble this, but I want to try it. So part of this exercise, I'm just gonna zoom in a little, that I went through with Karen was actually trying to get back to basics and follow the flows. And all of this stuff is in the town's financial model or debt model, by the way, but it's at an aggregate level. So we tried to break it down into components. And right now, this is actually I think her scenario 1. It says, if we assume in 2024, we're going to be fully built out and have $64 million on the books. You can play with this capture number. So you can capture none of it.
Or you can capture 75%.
There's a 0 up here. Oh, it's view only. Okay, we're going to capture 75. I didn't share it. But at least you can see it. So if you're capturing 75%, then in 2 years, when the state comes up with their valuation for 2026, 75% of that 64 million is going to be protected from the state funding formulas. So it won't be counted. This year, we're going to get $1 million in taxes, or in 2024. But when that new state valuation comes out, our county tax is going to go up $8,000. We're almost $9,000. And then the following year, our revenue sharing is going to go down almost $15,000. And for the 3 years following that, our state aid for education is going to go down about $37,000 a year. So this is the tax that we're talking about. Now, the piece that isn't quite in Karen's analysis yet is those new students coming in, we actually get paid for those. It takes, again, a couple of years, but the way the state funding formula works is Those 85 students, you'll get compensated for them in 2028 and 2029. Right now, it's to the tune of about 13,000 a kid. This is where, when I said they kind of make you whole, they're kind of making you whole for what you may have lost in the funding formula otherwise.
And John, just for a quick minute, so how do you arrive at the cost per student? You just take the school budget and divide it by the number of students, or?
Good question. So Karen's 18,000 is, it might be a little more than that now, but
Yeah,
it's basically the school budget divided by
Yes.
students. For the state's perspective, they look at the total cost of, they call it their essential programs and services, which is their formulaic approach to how much it should cost to provide basic services. They're going to reimburse you for all of that up to a point. That point is there's a mill rate, basically. It's around 7 right now, but so 7 mills per thousand of value is what you should pay for. The state's going to pay for anything extra or above that.
That's
For that
pretty good for us.
EPS formula, the average cost per student is about 13,000.
Mhm. Great, thanks.
And that's what's driving that 552.
But just, that's all figured in, I think the revenues are counted when we look at that, because we're looking at the school budget, the school expenditures minus the revenues, right? So that net 19,000 this year accounts for that, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you should probably using 19 or 20,000 on.
Yeah, it's
cost per student,
19,
and then the
yeah.
benefits.
Yeah.
It's not going to be a big difference.
Right.
So I guess my point is that the impacts, if you know the type of development, they're quantifiable, I think fairly specifically and in time. But if you don't know the type of development, there's a big margin of error. So that is something that keep in mind. We may want to understand what the intended use of this parcel is. And I think we can make a more informed decision about whether it makes sense for the town to do it. But were we speaking Greek?
I followed you, but I didn't get really quite to the end here in terms of,
The spec we have.
yeah, I got
Okay.
it here, yeah. And following you very closely, but it really is a big swing between minimum receiver and not. Right?
It is. I thought that would be
Wow.
too far to go today.
I do agree with you.
But yes, it is in there. It is a big difference if you're a minimum receiver or not. And that's something to consider as well.
And John, the other thing that I think we've always struggled with when we're doing these impacts. So when we first started doing it, we looked at the school in 2 ways, and I'd love to hear your feedback on this. So the first thing is, let's just take expenses minus, revenues, and that's your debt budget, and that's where we get the 19,000. We have gone through the budget sort of line by line and said, hey, you know what? We're probably not going to have a second superintendent. So we're not going to have all of these things. So we tried to draw a line between fixed costs and that differential that you get when you bring a new student on. And so I think we came up with, again, this is 5 years ago, so it's possible things have changed, but really about 30% of that 19,000 as it is today is really not going to be impacted by an additional student. So we've sometimes shown it both ways. Lately, we've just been showing, let's just go full bore and show the 100%. But, I think there is some benefit to looking at that, reduce that 70% versus the 100%. But I'll leave that to you in terms of any type of future analysis, which one to use.
Well, yeah, there's no perfect way. So you've got the buildings, right?
Yep.
So if you're not bumping up against capacity issues, it's not costing you the full 18 grand. You need some extra teachers. You got to keep your teacher ratios,
Right.
about right. So yeah, no, that's valid. But it's a complex thing to try to
Right.
quantify
Right,
specifically.
right. But yeah, I think that feedback, that does really help temper some of those costs. And I think legitimately, but,
On the flip side, though, if you are hitting capacity issues
right,
and that growth or new enrollment can push you over the breaking point where you need a new facility, well, it blows the 18,000 out of the water.
Right.
I think that comment is where I think you should always go with the higher number, because if we think about, I don't know, 10 years ago, we should have been collecting the full amount, because look where we are today, and we needed all that, as much funds as you can get, because eventually you will need that amount of money. You will need a new facility. You will need, sorry, another superintendent or something like that. And so I think when you think long-term planning, I think my number is appropriate. Cool.
right. And I, just to be clear, the other thing is the capital costs. We've been talking about service, not capital investment all along, right? So.
But debt service is
Right.
baked into operation.
Right,
The one thing we can do, your point's extremely well taken, is the intended use really matters here, right?
Right.
And so we've done with speculation, some different development scenarios. We can certainly ask to see if they have an idea and run these models with a little more certainty.
I think that would be helpful.
yep. At the
We'll ask.
time, yeah. And I think they're happy to cooperate. I think we had talked about this in the first place. And I said, well, the assignment was look at the differences between the zones, which are the theoretical maximums at that point. But doing a fifth scenario of what the downs might be planning with this is definitely the way to go.
The other benefit to that that's not necessarily financial is then the neighbors and, the council making the decision has an understanding of what they're
Mhm.
approving.
Yeah,
Right.
that's part of the value proposition, right?
So when you talk about sheltered value and also taxes collected, I'm still looking at this, this one spreadsheet here, so. And, it's clear the minimum receivership status really has a big impact, but it's also, a big difference between building it out or not building it out, and then, with or without a CEA, so. I have to say, I'm really, the thing that's really striking me here is what happens with the minimum receiver status. It's just,
But that's not something we have any control
yeah,
over.
that's the
right?
thing that bothers
Say
me.
any, but pretty much no control over.
But
It's life as we know it, so.
And certainly that minimal receiver status, I don't think has much of anything to do with this particular decision. I think that status has an effect on the financial implications of development.
sheltering value is good with respect to, in general, sheltering value is good with respect to how we come in and out of the minimum receivership, though.
That helps you stay in the funding formula.
That's right.
That's why we're not back in minimal receiver right now, I would suggest.
I think it is.
So, that was something that just happened. It wasn't something we planned to happen, right? The receivership
No.
status.
No, that status is bestowed upon us because we crested a threshold. And the reason we've stayed out of it for the last couple of years is that we've sheltered value that would be counted otherwise that probably would qualify us to go back into minimal receiver status. Have I said that right, John?
We would have been there sooner.
We may never have come out of it, frankly.
Yeah, so when the governor funded education at 55%.
Yep.
A complicated conversation in itself, that bumped us out of minimum receivership because the local share
Went up.
down. So what the state will cover is the minimum of what we actually spent for special education costs 2 years ago, or 50% of that, or what comes out of the funding formula, or 5% of the funding formula. So that's when they say minimum receivership, if you're receiving the minimum, if you're receiving one of those two catch-alls, then you're a minimum receiver. Now, a change that's planned for next year is right now that 50% of special education is planned to go to 55%, which I anticipate will bump us out of minimum receivership again. But we'll be getting more money from the state.
The other thing that, sorry, go ahead. The other thing that really, rattles around in my brain is that, if you look at other towns, it seems like there are, other towns that get help with schools, for example, Saco does. And what it seems like is that if you're growing faster and you're doing more development, it's more likely you're going to be a minimum receiver. Right? Like if you're a Falmouth or,
If you have a high valuation per student, then you're more likely to be a minimum receiver. So if you're over $1 million per student, $1.5 million, then you're probably going to be a minimum receiver. If you're below that, you'll get funding from the state. This funding for schools is totally different.
Yeah.
Has-
Doesn't have any bearing on
does-
that.
They rank your
Addition to
schools.
facilities and how you rank comparatively to other.
and where you're on the list where you're ever going to get any money for anything.
Yeah, as I recall, back in 2018 or 19, the school district put our 3 K-2 schools proposed to DOE, and I think they all ranked somewhere in the mid to high 30s. So that means there's more than 30 construction projects ahead. And I don't know how many a year they fund, but it's a handful.
And
The other, oh,
Right.
no, no.
When
you
we
go ahead.
built Wentworth, for example, though,
Zippo.
Right.
The middle school was the last one that had any state
Okay.
construction dollars.
And
And just the irony with that is that at the time before they even started construction, we knew it was a third undersized and
Right.
DOE said, no, you can't build any more than that.
that's.
So day one, 6th grade was in portables and they
Right.
continue to be in portables.
it's bad news.
Right.
But it is,
Well, the
the-
other part is the building was falling apart. I guess they had to pour a lot of local money in to make it
yeah.
right.
That is the conundrum about school funding, is that requirement that you cannot build excess capacity. You can only build for the existing population.
You never stay ahead of the curve.
That is correct.
No, and so John, the consequence is, since then, we've spent almost $30 million in the high school renovation expansion back in the early 2000s. Wentworth at 37 or 8 million. And now we're contemplating, another large investment all on the local dimes.
So I wanted to provide an opportunity for public comment if anybody has anything they'd like to add. I know we're running a little over and we have another meeting to run to. So is anybody in the public that would like to speak to anything we talked to today? Okay. You guys all set? All right.
Thanks a lot. Very helpful.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you,
for letting me
Karen,
come
very
and talk
much.
about this.
Can we just foreshadow a topic we'd love to bring to you next month if you're willing, or you'll tell us if you're willing? Let us pitch it to you first.
So in kind of the spirit of the earlier presentation this evening, we would like to bring the fire department before you to discuss. Again, fire department's a large cost center for us on an annual basis. They also have a lot of moving parts in their industry right now. They certainly have some staffing challenges. They have certainly increased demand from the community for their services and a whole series of other things. So we'd like to do another kind of informational presentation to you, and also talk about some of the specifics around revenue and their business and how things are changing and evolving. So I welcome the opportunity to do that as well.
So I love it. Can we talk about their fees a little bit as well? Okay. That sounds good. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye,
Thank
aye.
you, everybody. Have a great night.
Thanks.
Thank you.